Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivadacharya Ashtottara Shata Srimad His Divine Grace Abhaishnaravind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivadacharya Ashtottara Shata Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Mokshada Ekadashi Mahamotsav Ki Jai. Gita Jayanti Mahamotsav Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 13, entitled The Descendants of Dhruva Maharaj, texts 13 to 20. The text 13 is on the board. Okay, please repeat. Pushparnasya prabhabharya. Pushparnasya prabhabharya. Dosha chadve babhuvatuhu. Dosha chadve babhuvatuhu. Pratar madhyadinam sayam. Pratar madhyadinam sayam. Iti hi asan prabhasutaha. Iti hi asan prabhasutaha. Pushparnasya prabhabharya. Dosha chadve babhuvatuhu. Pratar madhyadinam sayam. Iti hi asan prabhasutaha. Pushparnasya prabhabharya. Dosha chadve babhuvatuhu. Pratar madhyadinam sayam. Iti hi asan prabhasutaha. Prabhuji's.
Pushpanasya
Mataji. Dosha chadve babhuvatuhu pratar madhyadinam sayam iti asan prabhasutaha pushparnasya prabhabharya chadve babhuvatuhu. Pushparnasya, of Pushparna, Prabha, Prabha, Bharya, wife, Dosha, Dosha, Cha, also, Dve, two, Babhuvatuhu, were, Prataha, Pratar, Madhyadinam, Madhyadinam, Sayam, Sayam, Iti, thus, he, certainly, Asan, were, Prabhasutaha, sons of Prabha. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Pushparna had two wives named Prabha and Dosha. Prabha had three sons named Pratar, Madhyaninam, and Sayam. Text 14. Pradosho nishchito vishtha iti dosha sutastreha vishtha sutam pushkarinyam sarvatejasam adade. Translation. Dosha had three sons, Pradosha, Nishita, and Vyushtha. Vyushtha's wife was named Pushkarini, and she gave birth to a very powerful son named Sarvateja. Text 15 and 16. Sachakshuhu sutam akutyam patnyam manum avapaha manor asuta mahishi virajan nadvala sutan purum kutsam tritam dyumnam satyavantam ritam vratam agnishtomam atiratram pradhyumnam shibim ulmukham. Sarvateja's wife Akuti gave birth to a son named Chakshusha, who became the sixth Manu at the end of the Manu millennium. Nadvala, the wife of Chakshusha Manu, gave birth to the following faultless sons: Puru, Kutsa, Trita, Dyumna, Satyavan, Ruta, Vrata, Agnishtoma, Atiratra, Pradhyumna, Shibi, and Ulmaka. Text 17. Ulmuko janayat putran pushkarinyam shaduttaman angam sumanasam kyatim kratum angirasam gayam. Of the 12 sons, Ulmuka begot 6 sons in the wife of Pushkarini. They were all very good sons, and their names were Anga, Sumana, Khyati, Kratu, Angira, and Gaya. Text 18. Sunitangasya ya patni sushuvevena mulbanam yaddau hishilyat sarajarishir nirvinnon niragat purat. The wife of Anga, Sunita, gave birth to a son named Vena, who was very crooked. The saintly king Anga was very disappointed with Vena's bad character, and he left home and kingdom and went out to the forest. Text 19 and 20. Yamanga shepu kupita vagvajra munaya khila gatasostasya bhuyaste mamantur dakshinam karam arajake tadaloke dasyubi piditaha prajaha jatu narayanam shena pritur adya kshitishvaraha. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation. My dear Vidura, when the great sages curse, their words are as invincible as a thunderbolt. Thus, when they cursed King Vena out of anger, he died. After his death, since there was no king, all the rogues and thieves flourished. The kingdom became unregulated, and all the citizens suffered greatly. On seeing this, the great sages took the right hand of Vena as a churning rod, and as a result of their churning, Lord Vishnu, in his partial representation, made his advent as King Prithu, the original emperor of the world. Purport. Monarchy is better than democracy, because if the monarchy is very strong, the regulative principles within the kingdom are upheld very nicely. Even 100 years ago, in the state of Kashmir in India, the king was so strong that if a thief were arrested in his kingdom and brought before him, the king would immediately chop off the hands of the thief. As a result of this severe punishment, there were practically no theft cases within the kingdom. Even if someone left something on the street, no one would touch it. The rule was that the things could be taken away only by the proprietor and that no one else would touch them. In the so-called democracy, wherever there is a theft case, the police come and take note of the case. But generally, the thief is never caught, nor is any punishment offered to him. As a result of incapable government, at the present moment, thieves, rogues, and cheaters are very prominent all over the world. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I remember many years back, I was having a personal darshan with my spiritual master, and he was very happy that I became a devotee. I was a new devotee at that time. And he said, so when your parents pass away, they'll realize that they're double dipping. So I said, Guru Maharaj, what does that mean, double dipping? So he said, if they take up Krishna consciousness, then they'll get the benefit of practicing Krishna consciousness themselves. And because you, as the son or daughter, doesn't matter, practice Krishna consciousness as well, they'll get a benefit of their children practicing. So in the same way, today is a very special day. We're also double dipping today because it's Gita Jayanti. It's the day that Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield of Kurukshetra over 5,300 years ago. And it's also Mokshada Ekadashi as well. So we can observe both of these things today. I'll try to touch upon both of these as well in the class. So Bhagavad Gita is a very foundational book for us, for all Vaishnavas. Our Guru Maharaj was saying that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna introduces himself. Krishna introduces himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Through verses like Matta Parataram Nanyat Kinchid Asti Dhananjaya. Nothing is higher than me. Everything rests upon me as pearl strung upon a thread. Am Sarvasya Prabhu Matta Sarvam Paramurti. Everything comes from me. Those who are wise, they engage in worship of me with all their hearts. Right? So he establishes his identity as transcendental, not of this material world. And he establishes the Sambandha Gyan, basically the relationship between us as individual tiny spirit souls with Krishna, that we should worship him, pay our homage to him. And then, that's all we learn about Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. But then, when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we get to understand Krishna a bit more intimately. We get to understand that, yeah, he may be this great person, but he's just like us. He has feelings, he has things he likes, he has things he doesn't like. He has relationships just like us. He has his pastimes, his friends, relatives, like that. He lives in a certain place, he likes doing things. So we get to learn more about Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. We go deeper in our relationship with Krishna. And then in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said we learn about Radha Tattva. So in Gita and Bhagavatam, we learn about Krishna Tattva, and all about Krishna's Leela, his name, form, qualities, pastimes. But specifically in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we learn about Radha Tattva, in the sense that even Krishna, he likes to come as his own devotee in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So even though they're both transcendental, Bhagavan and Bhakti, in this sense, transcendently speaking, Bhakti is even higher, because then Bhagavan wants to come and perform Bhakti to himself. So we learn about, Radha Tattva means we learn about devotional service to Krishna. So we learn from Krishna himself as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how to render service to Krishna. And we get to see all these amazing pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu and their devotees. One of the key pastimes in Chaitanya Charitamrita is all about honoring prasad. Krishna asks Kaviraj Goswami, although he's in his 90s, very fragile, frail, he mentions he could leave his body at any time. Still, if you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see he goes into the details of what Mahaprabhu ate, what Nityananda Prabhu ate, what Advaita Acharya was serving, cakes floating in custard and deep fried pakoras, and he's in his 90s. And so prasad is a very important aspect of bhakti. So this is the progression, but it starts with Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita has how many verses? 700. And it's mentioned that Mahabharata, from where Bhagavad Gita is coming from, has 100,000, right? In the heavenly planets, there are also versions of Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahabharata. I heard from one devotee that the demigods, their version of the Mahabharata is 600,000 verses, and it contains all the mantras for like throwing astras and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's not accessible for us here in Bhumandala. But 100,000 verses, and the Gita is the essential 700 verses, the quintessence of Mahabharata. Just like when you boil milk, you pour it into a cup and you just leave it, especially if there's fans or something going on, then at the top of the milk there'll be a thick skin that forms, right? And it's very tasty. And before you drink your milk, you can just pick it up with your fingers and put it in your mouth. So Bhagavad Gita is like that. It's like that layer of rich, tasty cream that settles on top of the milk of the Mahabharata. So 700 verses contained within the Bhagavad Gita. How many verses does Krishna speak out of those 700 verses? Any idea? 574. Krishna speaks 574 verses. Who speaks the next most amount of verses? Arjuna. He speaks 84 verses. Then? Any idea? Sanjaya, he speaks 41 verses. And Dhritarashtra speaks how many? Just one. Just the first one. Okay, so 574 verses by Krishna, 84 by Arjuna, 41 by Sanjaya, the minister of Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra speaks one. When I think about Srila Prabhupada's books, there's some stories obviously that come to my mind about how Srila Prabhupada's books have played an important role in my life, how they've inspired me. One particular story I remember, specifically in relation to the Bhagavad Gita, I must have been, I was probably 15 or 16 years old. I was in high school. My parents were not devotees, even I was not a devotee. But from the Juhu temple, probably sometime back in the 80s, late 80s or early 90s, my parents had gotten a copy of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. And they had just kept it in the cupboard of my room, somewhere at the back. And one day I just happened to be cleaning my room and I found that book. And I was in a selective high school, so there's a great emphasis on academics and you have to get good grades and all this sort of stuff. So I was going through a period of intense studies and I didn't like it. Started questioning, why do I have to go through this suffering of studying? And the stress of exams and performing well. So I happened to find the Bhagavad Gita in the back of my cupboard at that time. And I started to read it. And every day I would read, several verses before going to sleep. So growing up in Australia, since I was a very, very young kid, obviously I picked up the habits of Mlechadesh, of the Western world, and I was eating meat as well, like many of the people that grew up here, and anywhere else in the world for that matter, in this day and age. And I remember one night, I was flicking through the Bhagavad Gita, and I came across a purport of Srila Prabhupada, and I have to go back and actually see where that purport is. It's either in the 8th chapter or the 13th chapter, I believe. Srila Prabhupada is saying there that suppose that a cow has a lifespan of 20 years. And if someone prematurely kills the cow after 10 years, then the soul which was in the body of the cow has to again take birth as a cow and live out the remainder of its 10 years. And I remember just reading that in Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and it just hit me. It's like someone slapped my face. And I remember just putting the book aside and just falling down on my bed on my pillow with my eyes open. I was just thinking, wow, so what have I been doing all these years, I'm getting bad karma for myself, and I'm interfering with another soul's journey. As Prabhupada mentions, another soul's sojourn through this material world. And after that very night, then I made a sankalpa to myself. I made a vow to myself that from now onwards, I will stop eating meat. And that's what I did. Just cold turkey, I just gave up, just after reading Srila Prabhupada's purport. And my realization was, this book is something very special. For 16 years, this is what I've been doing. And just by reading this one paragraph, it has changed my habits. So whoever has written this book must be a very powerful person. So that's my initial impression of the Bhagavad Gita. Very powerful, And Bhagavad Gita talks about some very important topics. Of course, there's 5 topics that Bhagavad Gita talks about. And these 5 topics cover everything within this material world and the spiritual world. In other words, there's no subject matter which can fall outside of these 5 topics. And the 5 topics are Ishwar. It talks about the Supreme Controller, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all about Him. It talks about Jiva. It talks about the living entities, which are parts and parcels with Him, and how they have an eternal relationship of servitude with Him. It talks about Prakriti, the environment in which the conditioned souls act. That can be the material energy, or that can be the spiritual energy in the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha. In other words, Prakriti refers to the energy of Krishna. 3 energies are there. There's the spiritual energy, the material energy, and the marginal energy, which is the jivas. Then it talks about karma. As Krishna says at the start of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says that living entities by nature are very energetic, and they can't stop acting. They have to act. They have to do something. So either we perform bhakti, akarma, or we perform materialistic fruitive activities known as karma. So karma talks about activities that the living entities can perform. And what is the final topic? Time, kala. Now out of these, which is temporary? 4 are eternal, but only 1 is temporary. Karma. Because karma acts only in the mature world. Time is also eternal because it's a representation of the super soul. And even though at the end of the universe, when Mahavishnu breathes in, it seems that time has stopped. But actually it hasn't, because time is dependent on the breath of Mahavishnu. That is, it is that breathing of Mahavishnu which gives rise to time within this material world. And the breathing of Mahavishnu is unstoppable. It's always going on. So time is also eternal. So Bhagavad Gita is very powerful. And we see in the Bhagavad Gita that various different types of yoga systems are spoken about. I think I was mentioning this several weeks ago. It talks about karma yoga, it talks about jnana yoga, it talks about ashtanga or dhyana yoga, and it talks about bhakti yoga. And Krishna progresses through all of these throughout the Bhagavad Gita, and he finally establishes that the topmost yoga system is bhakti. Now you can understand this practically speaking through the example of the yoga ladder. You've heard of this concept of the yoga ladder? So it's exactly what I just said. You start off with karma, you rise to jnana, you rise to dhyan yoga, and then you come to bhakti. Now, there's two levels which are off the yoga ladder. They're known as hedonism. Have you heard of this term called hedonism? If someone is hedonistic, it means that they're not following any rules and regulations, they're just enjoying their senses wildly. They may not believe in God, nothing like that. They just, anything they do is not connected to Krishna, therefore it's not yoga. So there's two types of hedonistic people. One type is simply absorbed in the mode of ignorance and the mode of passion. And one type is also hedonistic, but they're more in the mode of goodness. For example, let's consider the first type, those who are in the mode of passion ignorance. You may have come across people that are just drug addicts or just sleep at odd hours of the day. They're addicted to all sorts of sinful habits. They still want to enjoy their senses. They're driven by the mode of passion. And at nighttime, they engage in intoxication and they just sleep. So such type of materialistic people are in the mode of passion ignorance. Now, there's a concept in the mature world called bhoga and tyaga, which means enjoyment and renunciation. In other words, if you indulge your senses too much in sense gratification, you'll get a bit fed up. You'll get burnt out. And then you'll think, let me renounce sense gratification. But because you don't have knowledge higher than material enjoyment, you can't come to the stage of yoga. So basically you're trapped in this cycle of bhoga and tyaga, material sense enjoyment, then you get burnt out, then you come to renunciation for some period of time, then you get tired of that because you're not getting any sense gratification, any higher taste, then again you go back to bhoga. So those who are in the mode of goodness, they're also enjoying their senses, but they're doing it in a bit more regulated way. They may perform yoga, they may have a vegetarian diet, take care of their body, exercise, do some sort of meditative practices and all that sort of stuff. But both of these people, whether they're in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, they're still not engaged in yoga because whatever activities they're performing is not connected to Krishna. Now in the Vedic culture, those who are hedonistic but in the mode of goodness, they're known as karmakandis. Karmakandis. That means they perform elaborate sacrifices, big sacrifices to please the demigods so that they can enjoy material benefits for themselves. Now, if a particular karmakandi is very fortunate, if they've had some degree of devotee association in the past or the direct mercy of Krishna, a karmakandi will realize that, hey, I'm performing all these yagyas to please the moon god, the sun god, Indra, Vayu, whoever. But in all these yagyas that I'm performing, Vishnu is always getting some oblations. Vishnu is always being respected. So then he may think to himself, instead of performing yagyas and sacrifices for these demigods, if Vishnu is being celebrated in all these yagyas anyway, let me just do yagyas to satisfy Vishnu. Yagyartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartam karma kauntya mukta sanga samachara. Then he comes to the platform of karma yoga. From karma kanda, he rises to karma yoga. Yat karoshi yat ashnashi yat judoshi dadas yat tat kurushu madarpanam. This is karma yoga. So he still has material desires. But now he's performing yagyas, not to satisfy the demigods, but to satisfy Krishna or Vishnu. So this is how he takes his first step onto the yoga ladder, which is karma yoga. Okay? Now again, if a karma yogi is very fortunate, how does he rise to the platform of Gyan? By performing sacrifices and pleasing Vishnu, his heart is slowly getting purified. And he thinks to himself, okay, I'm performing these sacrifices, Vishnu is pleased, I'm getting material sense enjoyment in a legitimate way, but this material sense gratification is not pleasing me. It's not deeply satisfying my heart. So material happiness or material activities are not actually pleasing me, therefore let me give up material activities. Let me give it up, because material activities are not satisfying me. This is how a karma yogi rises to the platform of Gyan, Gyan Yoga. So he was performing material activities, but then he gives it up. So Gyanis, they don't want to perform material activities. They prefer just to study and read the Vedanta, and they prefer to see the whole world through the eyes of Vedanta. They keep reciting mantras like Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahmanam, and they see, that's their sadhana. Their sadhana is to see the whole world as Brahman by reciting these mantras and by studying the Vedanta. Now, Prabhupada quotes that famous verse, Ye nirandaksha vimukti mananas tvayasta bhavat avishuddha buddhaya aruya kritshena param padam tata tato yushmadangraya tato nadirta yushmadangraya, which basically says that Jnanis may rise to the platform of Brahman, they may merge into Brahman, but because there's no activities there, they get bored. So they come back to this material world, and then they perform philanthropic activities. They open schools, they open hospitals, this and that. So the Gyan Yogi, a fortunate Gyan Yogi, if he is fortunate by some contact with devotees or by the direct mercy of Krishna, he thinks to himself, I've stopped material activities, but this is also not satisfying me. Because as a spirit soul, I want to perform some activities, but I'm just artificially restricting myself. So the Gyan Yogi starts practicing Ashtanga Yoga. He starts performing Dhyan Yoga. Because what is the ultimate goal of Ashtanga Yoga? What happens? There's 8 stages in Ashtanga Yoga. Yeah? So what is the topmost stage in Ashtanga Yoga? Any idea? No? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. And what happens at the stage of Samadhi? What is the yogi seeing? He's seeing Paramatma. Right? So the ultimate realization, the goal of Ashtanga Yoga or Dhyan Yoga is to witness the Paramatma in the heart, to realize that Krishna, the Paramatma, is sitting on your heart. And the whole point is that the Ashtanga Yoga is thinking to himself that I gave up material activities as a Gyan Yogi. That didn't satisfy me. Who is that person that I should perform spiritual activities for? You see the connection? I gave up material activities as a Gyani. It didn't satisfy me. I still have to perform some activities. So who is that person that I should perform activities for on a spiritual platform? And then by perfecting, Ashtanga Yoga, they realize that that person is Krishna in my heart. Then from there, they can make the jump to bhakti. Because bhakti is practically rendering, active devotional service, as Srila Prabhupada says, to Paramatma, to Krishna in the heart, to Bhagavan. So this is the stage of progression. It's just a sample analysis, if you may, of how someone who's hedonistic, completely off the yoga ladder, takes their first step, performs karma yoga, rises to Gyan, then Ashtanga, and comes to bhakti. Now that seems like a very long process, right? It probably takes many, many millions of lifetimes. But the glory of Krishna consciousness, the glory of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada is that he may take someone who's a hedonist in the modes of passion and ignorance, pick him up, pull him by the hair, and bring him all the way to the top to perform bhakti yoga. That's what Srila Prabhupada has done. Srila Prabhupada has pulled us from activities that we were engaged in the mode of passion and ignorance.
He's completely bypassed the mode of goodness. He's bypassed karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, which takes lifetimes to perfect, and he's pulled us right to the top so that we can perform bhakti yoga immediately. So, just some words about the Bhagavad Gita. We see in what we've read so far today, in these verses, that we're talking about the generations following Dhruva Maharaj. He had 2 sons. Utkala was just like Jadabharth. He didn't want to take up the position of being a king, so then it went to Dhruva Maharaj's other son. And then we see that, this particular king had this many sons through this wife. And then the eldest son, he became a king, and he married this wife, and then he had this many sons. And so much detail is given. So I remember Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj, he was mentioning many years ago in a Bhagavatam class that this is an example, this is evidence that the Shastra is bona fide. It has value. We can put our faith in it because so much detail is provided within the Shastra. There's no fictional work that you can find which talks in so much detail about this person married this person, this many kids were there, and then this, it doesn't go into so much detail. And that's not the only thing. He also mentioned that the characters or the person that we read of here, the great devotees that we read of here, are also mentioned in other Shastras as well. So there's a cross-verification process. Specifically, he was talking about the pastime of Vritrasura. In Canto 6, Chitraketu Maharaj, he gets cursed by Durga Devi to take birth as a demon, Vritrasura. So the pastime of Vritrasura is mentioned not only in Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's also mentioned in other Puranas as well. So this cross-verification is another evidence that the Shastra is bona fide and correct. But that's a side point. We're learning and we're talking about great kings, great queens, their children, their progeny. We're learning about pure devotees. So one such devotee is Maharaj Yayati. Now there's a couple of lessons that we can learn from Maharaj Yayati. I think the pastime comes either in Canto 8 or Canto 9 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj Yayati, he's a great king, and he comes from the lineage of the Soma god. Right? We have the Surya Vamsha and the Chandra Vamsha. So he comes from Chandra Vamsha. And who else came in Chandra Vamsha? Krishna himself. Krishna himself came from Chandra Vamsha. So the pastime, I'm not sure if you've read it, but basically what happens is that there's 2 young girls in the prime of their youth. One is Devayani and one is Sharmishta. Devayani is the daughter of Shukracharya. And Sharmishta she's a princess of a great king, but he's a Rakshasa. So one day, Sharmishta, Devayani, and many of their friends, they're bathing in some river, in some forest. And along comes Lord Shiva with Parvati. And the girls get, scared, so they want to cover themselves up. Now, in that confusion, what happens is that Devayani accidentally takes the clothes of Sharmishta. And Sharmishta gets very angry at Devayani. So there's a tussle, there's an argument. And Sharmishta actually throws Devayani into a well. She's helpless, she's stuck in a well. Now, as the typical story may go, a great hero comes along riding on a horse, which is our Yayati Maharaj. He hears this woman stuck in a well calling out for help. So he rescues her from the well, and Devayani agrees to marry him. So they get married. But the father of Sharmishta is a bit scared, because my daughter has thrown Devayani into the well, and she's the daughter of Shukracharya, a great powerful Brahmana. If he finds out, which he did, then he would curse me. And I don't want that curse. Just like we were reading, right? That My dear Vidura, in the translation today, my dear Vidura, when great sages curse, their words are as invincible as a thunderbolt. I don't want to get cursed by Shukracharya. So they come up with an agreement that Sharmishta would be the maidservant of Devayani in her marriage to Yayati. So that's what happens. Now time passes and Yayati and Devayani, they have two children, two boys, Yadu and Turvasu, are born. And Sharmishta sees this. Remember, she's the maidservant. And then she also starts to think that maybe it'll be nice if I also have some children as well. So in secret, she approaches Marjayati. And Marjayati warns her that you're not supposed to do this. You're just a maidservant. It's not right. But then, by the influence of lust, material desires, they also have children. So Yayati marriage also has children with Sharmishta. They have 3 more boys. Now, what happens? Shukracharya finds out that Yayati has impregnated Sharmishta when he's only supposed to be having a relationship with my daughter Devayani. He gets angry. And then he curses Yayati. I curse you that even though right now you're in the prime of your youth, you're in your 20s, I curse you that you will get old age immediately right now. And when someone curses someone, most of the times it's done out of anger, right? Anger and frustration. So what do we learn from the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita? Krodad bhavati samoha, samohat smriti vibrama. What follows anger is samoha, delusion, and bewilderment of memory. So the acharyas say bewilderment of memory. What is that memory? That memory refers to the instructions of the Shastra. When one is angry, naturally one forgets the good advice which is mentioned in the Shastra. So here we have a situation where Shukracharya has cursed his son-in-law to become an old and invalid man. So he starts to think to himself, why did I do this? If I curse my son-in-law to become an invalid, then how will my daughter enjoy? She's also a young girl. How will she enjoy the rest of her life if she has to serve an old husband? So then Shukracharya says, okay, I'm going to edit. I'm going to modify my curse to you. Yati, if you want, you can transfer the old age to someone else. So Yayati, of course, he has strong lust, material desires, he wants to enjoy. So he approaches his eldest son, Yadu. My dear son Yadu, I am your father. And in Vedic culture, we know that the order of the father is very sacred. The children are supposed to obey the father. So my dear son Yadu, please take the old age from me. And what do you think? Does Yadu agree or disagree? He disagrees. But Yadu is still glorified for that. Even though he disagreed with the order of his father, Yayati, Yadu is still glorified. And the reason that the acharyas give, I heard from my spiritual master, is that Yadu knew that in the future, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, would take birth in his dynasty. Now Yadu also knew that even though he takes the old age from his father now, after a long period of time, his father would give him back the youth and accept the old age again. So he didn't want to delay the appearance of Krishna within his dynasty by first accepting the old age from Yayati for a long period of time, and then finally after that period of time exhausts, then again he would be given the youth back by his father, and then again he would have to go through the whole grihastha ashram and finally give birth to children who would then in turn give birth to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he didn't want to delay the appearance of Krishna, and for that reason he said no to his father. And that's why Yadu is glorified. So Yayati approaches, I think he had 2 or 3 sons, 5 sons in total. So the 3 middle sons he approaches, and they all say, no, we're not going to take your old age. We want to enjoy. What kind of a deal is this? So typical Kali Yuga children. And then he approaches the younger son, Puru. And Puru is wise, and he accepts the old age from Yayati. So what does Yayati do when he gets the youth back? He enjoys for 1,000 years. For 1,000 years, he enjoys with his wife all kinds of sense gratification. It's only after 1,000 years he snaps out of his hallucination and realizes, he looks back in retrospect, I've wasted so much time. 1,000 years have passed just like this. I've been engaged in fulfilling my material desires. They're still there, they're still raging. I'm still not satisfied. I've just simply wasted time. So there's two things that we can learn from this story about material desires. The first thing is that our mind, influenced by lust and cheated by Maya, will make us think that I have material desires in my mind, and if I fulfill my material desires will go away. I will destroy my material desires by fulfilling them. If I fulfill my material desires, I'll be peaceful. They won't haunt me. They won't prick me. But that's not the case. That is a trap of Maya. No matter how many times you fulfill your material desires, they will not be satisfied. In fact, they'll come back even more powerful, even more stronger. And Marjayati is known to have, there's a verse in the Mahabharata, because his story, I was talking about the cross-referencing. So not only is Yati Marja's story mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's also mentioned in the Mahabharata as well. There in the Mahabharata, there is one shloka, there's one verse that Marjayati says. He says that just as one cannot expect a fire to be doused out by adding a spoon of ghee to it, similarly, one cannot expect material desires to go away by fulfilling material desires. So that's the first lesson. We can't fulfill our material desires by trying to fulfill them, right? The second lesson, and this is a very common thing that people just throw. I'm young now, my senses are strong, so let me enjoy sense gratification now, and I'll take to Krishna consciousness when I'm an old person, right? We've all heard that. Yeah? When we're old, we'll take to Krishna consciousness. But Yayati's material desires were not destroyed even after 1,000 years. In other words, the passage of time does not destroy. The passage of time does not reduce the strength of material desires as well. They're always there. Even the passage of time cannot destroy it. Even 50 years, 80 years will not destroy your material desires. The passage of time will destroy your physical body. Your physical body will get destroyed by the passage of time, but material desires will not get destroyed. So therefore, even if you're an old person, in your 80s or 90s, your mind will still have material desires raging inside. But you won't have the physical body to be able to fulfill those material desires. And that's exactly why Marjayati asked Puru to exchange his youth for his old age. So he realized through experience, but we don't have to go through that experience. So you may be asking then, so how do we get rid of material desires? By fulfilling material desires, I can't get rid of them. The passage of time is not going to get rid of material desires. So what do I do? In the Bhagavad Gita, we've heard that verse, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dena rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishta nivartate. In the second chapter, there's a verse, I think it's 2.49 or 5.1. Krishna is saying that a conditioned soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment. The taste for sense enjoyment may still be there, but by purposefully restricting oneself through good association by rules and regulations and performing devotional service, gradually one develops a higher taste, to get rid of the lower taste of material desires. So the only way you can get rid of material desires, I mentioned those two ways. So one of the ways is that by developing a more superior taste, so you can get rid of the lower taste, and that's only possible through bhakti yoga. The second way is what Prahlad Maharaj says. He says, Yan maitunadi grihamedi sukhamitucham khanduyaneva karayoravi dukkha dukkam tripyanti neha karayoriva dukkha bhaja kandutivat manasajam vishaheta dira. He compares material desires to be like an itch. So I'm guessing everyone here has been bitten by mosquitoes before? Yeah? So when you get bitten by a mosquito, your natural instinct is to scratch it, to feel some relief. And you do feel some relief. And Prabhupada says, so you scratch more, because it comes back. And then you find some relief. But then it comes back again, and you scratch even more. And then finally, after scratching it and scratching and scratching it, you look down, and there's blood coming out, Srila Prabhupada says. So what does that mean? The itch is compared to material desires. So when we fulfill the material desires by scratching the itch, eventually, dukkha, karayoriva dukkha hi dukkham. Dukkha comes. Another place in the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, it says, Yehi samsparsha jhabhoga dukkha yona yevate adyantavanta kauntya na teshu ramate buddha. Those who are Buddhas, those who are wise, they don't engage in material sense gratification because they know that that type of enjoyment has a beginning and has an end. So what's the use? What's the point? It's temporary. And by doing that, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, it's full of dukkha. So Prahlad Maharaj is saying the same thing, dukkha. So he gives us a strategy. He says, tolerate the itch. So it's something that everyone here can try next time. Next time if a mosquito happens to bite you, or next time, I don't know if itches are contagious, like, you know how if I start yawning, you'll also feel like yawning. Right? That's a psychological fact. So I don't know if itches are like that. If I start itching myself, maybe you'll also feel an itch somewhere in your body, I'm not sure. But next time if you feel an itch somewhere, try not to scratch it. Try to tolerate it. Now the thing is, let's say if you have an itch here on your arm, and then, okay, Nrsimha Prabhu said tolerate the itch, so I'll tolerate. But then your whole mind is still on your hand, right? I'm tolerating, but yeah, my mind is focusing there. So Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita as well. He says, Karmendriyani samyamya yaste manasasmaram mityachara suchyate. He says, you may externally control your senses, but internally in your mind, you may be focused on sense gratification. And Krishna says such a person is a mityachara, he's a pretender, he's a false person. So when you're tolerating the itch, don't focus your mind on that itch. Try to divert your mind, chant Hare Krishna, take darshan of Radha Gopinath, read something, divert your mind away from that itch and focus it on Krishna. And you will find, and I've tried it myself through practical experience, that's why I'm encouraging you to also try with this small example given by Prahlad Maharaj in the Shastra. Divert your mind and focus on Krishna, and you'll see after a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's like you never had an itch there. The itch just goes away. But if we focus on the itch, that's all we do. But divert your mind and it'll go away. And it may come back in the future again, like material desires. They come back, because it's a process of purification. So when it comes back again divert your mind. And in this way you develop strength. You develop conviction and you develop faith in the Shastras. So today is Mokshada Ekadashi. Srila Prabhupada in the purport is talking about monarchy being better than democracy. The rulers were very powerful kings. They had a lot of training. The story of Mokshada Ekadashi is that there's a king. He has a dream. He sees that his father is suffering in hell. And he approaches the Brahmin priests in his kingdom. What happened to my father? Why is he suffering in hell? The Brahmins say that in his previous life, he had an illicit relationship with another woman. So as a result of that, he's suffering in hell. So he asks, how can I free my father from this hellish condition? The Brahmins say, we don't know, but let's go to the ashram of Parvat Muni. So they go to the ashram of Parvat Muni. Parvat Muni says, there's only one really practical solution I see, and that Ekadashi is coming. It's called Mokshada Ekadashi. And if you perform strict fasting on this day, observe the Ekadashi very nicely, then your father will get liberated from his hellish condition. So this king, he goes back to his kingdom, and not only he fasts, but he gets his children, his wife, his family to fast as well. And at the end of the fast, they give their merit, they give the benefit of the fasting to the king's father. And as soon as that's done, on the morning of Dwadashi, they get the darshan, they get a vision of seeing that father rising from the hellish condition, passing through Bhumandala, passing through their very eyes, and rising up to the heavenly planets. And as he's going up, the story in Ekadashi Mahatmya says that he's thanking his son. Thank you very much, you've liberated me. He goes up to heavenly planets. But Ekadashi Mahatmya says that even though he goes up to heavenly planets, he continues his devotional service there. So Ekadashi is like that. Yes, performing Ekadashi gives us punya on a material platform, but it also gives us devotional credit, bhakti unmukhi sukriti as well. So as far as possible, to our capacity, we should try to observe today on all Ekadashis. And today, if you have the opportunity to gift or give Bhagavad Gita to someone, please do. Ekadashi Mahatmya also says that if one does that, it's very, very pleasing to Krishna as well. Or at least read Bhagavad Gita for some time. Okay, I'll finish here. We're over time. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.